Welcome today. We are more than halfway through our OSCQR 13 webinars. We only have 5 left after today. And I just want to remind everybody as you're coming in, make sure to register for the Why OSCQR with Rob from SUNY Online. He's a co-creator of OSCQR, and he's going to talk about the impact of OSCQR, how it was built, how it's used at SUNY, and then you can ask him all kinds of questions that you have, deep questions about OSCQR. You can get your answers to. So I'm going to share out my screen. There we go. Excellent. So we are on 539. So we have one more in the section 5 before we move on to section 6. And 539 actually was recently rewritten. For OSCQR 539, it's about expectations for course interactions. So that includes assignments, discussions, group work, any kind of communications. And it specifically is going to talk about how the use of examples impact students. So here, that is quite a change from last time. So I'm not going to play the video. Here's the last time. It used to be expectations for interactions are clearly stated, netiquette, grade, weight, model, examples, times, and frequencies. So that really fell into 3.8, which we did last week. We talked about all these things last week. And so this week specifically is about interactions with the class. So the activities and the pedagogy that's happening in the class. There is a video. I'm not going to play this video because it actually talks about the previous writing of this standard, and it's not up to date. So it's a pretty good video that you can watch about these net etiquettes and grade weighting. So you can take your time and watch through that on the slides, but we're not going to watch through it. What we're going to do is we're going to move through to part 1, right? We're back to our part 1. So this has been updated, and our part 1 basically talks about the expectations for assignment, class participation, proctoring, due dates, group work, collaboration, and attendance, right? Should be clear and easy for students to find. And again, we refer back to that adult learners need to understand why they are doing these things, or they believe they are busy work and they don't really apply to the degree that they're getting. So it's really important to answer that why question for adults. And for the second part, we're talking about clear expectations for timing and frequency of interaction, activities, and assignments, and the standards that you're asking for in those assignments. So that means criteria, rubrics, examples. It also talks a little bit about blended courses. We haven't been talking too much about hybrid or blended courses for this. It would include any synchronous events you have as well into the interactions. It also has a lot to do with regular and substantive interaction, which is required for online courses by federal law. That comes out of the DOE's regulations for what happens in online courses. And it again talks about clearly stating and modeling all the interactions and communications. And last time we did talk about communication modeling. It talks about the course information, overview, and syllabus material, sets those expectations for interactions, and it talks about explicitly how, what, where, and when, right? And we talked about that with standard 538 as well. The fourth part about this, again, lists about the community function as a group and as an individual when you're talking about interactions. What are the discussion boards? How are they going to use? How are assignments going to be used? How are testing or group work going to happen in the course? And setting expectations for that and setting rubrics and examples. So really it comes down to these practices: expectations for communications, which is your office hours, the ask a question discussion board, how pronouns and preferred names are used with communications. And I just want to shout out to Caring Campus as well, where you learn and use student names in the class. So a lot of this we've talked about in 538, the previous standard. So I'm not going to go over that again. So I refer you back to that recording. And I also refer to you to join in Caring Campus. I put a link in there so you'll be able to register for Caring Campus. Hopefully it's still open. Maybe somebody can let us know if it's still open for registration. And the second set of practices is what we're going to talk about tonight. So setting expectations for individual and group work, which includes discussions, timing, frequencies, and modeling. Net etiquette, we talked about last time, so we're going to skip that. And we're going to talk about assignments, collaboration, activities, and formal writing within the class. And how we're going to do that, how these practices come together, is something called clear and simple instructions by the TILT framework, which we've talked about a little bit before. I don't know if anybody has seen the information on TILT before or watched one of the webinars I've done before on TILT, but really this is what it comes down to, this main practice, which is clear and simple instructions. TILT really refers to the why, how, where, and when of the assignment or activity language, which means it's setting our expectations. The clear and concise use of language within those activities, the expectations of goals, communications, and how to get help are set. It also includes a task list, criteria of rubrics, and examples from past assignments or activities. And this also includes a due date, grading and feedback expectations, which we talked a lot about grading expectations last time. And we're going to talk a little bit more in detail about those tonight. So what is the TILT framework? The TILT framework has three different parts to it. One is to provide goals and expectations. Two, to provide a task list with explicit instructions. Three, to provide rubrics and examples. And really what this is the TILT framework is setting up scaffolding for you. Ooh, winter break. Thank you, Heidi. Winter break. There's going to be a Caring Campus. So if you missed it this time, go make sure you get it in winter break. So how are we going to do this? I'm going to share out another, there we go. We're going to share out this, another PowerPoint with you about clear expectations, writing clear instructions, and this TILT framework. So I'm going to walk through this TILT framework with you. So why write clear instructions? Well, we know that it helps students complete the assignments, right? It makes it easy for them. It increases student confidence and belonging, and it increases success and retention, especially for historically marginalized and first-generation students. And how do we know this, right? What does the research say about this? Well, the research says, and so here's Mary Ellen Winklemas. She's currently the executive director over at Brandeis for the Center of Teaching and Learning. She's been at a few different universities over time. One of them was UNLV out in Las Vegas. She was also, I believe, in Wisconsin at one point too as well. So Mary Ann was the primary researcher for the TILT project when it went through UNLV, and then was picked up by the Association of American Colleges and Universities. And what do we know about that? So we know that the transparency of learning, teaching in higher ed, which is our TILT, demonstrated in national studies that academic assignments and activities enhance student success, especially first generation, low income, and underrepresented students, at a statistically significant level with a medium to large size for students who are historically marginalized. And so this first round, I believe there's over 2,500 faculty participated, and thousands of students. And what they found was that they found a formula in which to do activities and assignments in, which is really a mimicking scaffolding, which is what they understand the purpose, task, and criteria of an assignment or activity. Students experience academic confidence, sense of belonging, and a greater awareness of the skills that they are building. And it has a higher rate of return on retention for the following year. So students who are exposed and use TILT framework actually come back more often. What we also found was that this TILT framework is only one of a handful of practices in higher ed that is easy to implement, it's fully scalable, and it's repeatable, right? We can reproduce these effects. And so she's been doing this for more than, 10 years now. And we have since 2016. So it's not quite 10 years, but 8 years. And we see over and over again when we're doing the research that we can measure statistical difference in the students' performances once you introduce this. And so this is now part of OSCQR, is where you start scaffolding individual and group collaboration using this transparent framework. So how do you do that? There's 4 basic areas for TILT framework. 1, you state purpose. Why is this important to me? Sometimes I like to call it the what's in it for me answer. And we've talked about this where adult learners need to understand the goal of the assignment and how it's going to be relevant to their personal lives, whether it's going to be about the field of practice, about their long-term goals or their short-term goals. But they need to be reminded over and over again why these assignments are important. The second part of TILT is task. What will students be doing it, and how will they will be doing it, right? There's also a when in there as well. Then the third part is criteria for success. Whether it's a checklist or a rubric, students can self-evaluate their progress and how they're doing in the process of the assignment or activity. And then the fourth area is called examples. Examples that are sufficient and inefficient need to be included for the student to understand in context what they're being asked to do. So when these 4 things are regularly asked within assignments and activities, and this is scaffolding, right? It goes back to that orientation, model, practice, and then assess, right? It's the same thing. These 4 things, when they're put together, they will improve your course, and you'll see a statistical difference. How does this work in practice? Step 1. This research actually came up with a nice little template that helps you design your assignment instructions. So you have the assignment date and due date at the top. Then you're going to talk about the purpose of this project and how it impacts the student's life in the context of the field or their short-term or long-term goals, right? Why are we doing this assignment, right? What are you doing? Then you're going to talk about what you're measuring, right? What is the actual outcomes that the assignment aligns to, right? What are the objectives the assignment aligns? And there's 2 different types of objectives, right? We have skills objectives, which is our do's and our psychomotor, and where they pick up techniques with the skills, or knowledge, right? That's our other, where they know, where they understand, where they can apply, right? So those are our blooms, right? And they spill out into skills, which is our practices, and knowledge, which is our content knowledge of the discipline, right? The actual content and context, glossary, maps, you know it, right? So we're splitting them out, right? Secondly, here's our task. You're going to write an actual checklist or task list in your activity or assignment, which has step-by-step guidelines for students and includes any technology scaffolding in that process. So if they're going to be, if you haven't introduced them to discussion posts, you're going to add, how to discussion link in this task list, right? So you're going to give them a step-by-step task list for that. And in some of the examples you've seen week to week for me, I use a lot of these task lists, right? Over and over again, you find them in all these different areas within all these examples I've been providing. And then finally, you show them the criteria for success. And there's 2 points to this. One is could be a rubric, right? You're giving them a checklist or a rubric with criteria, which they can self-assess. And 2, you're providing a sufficient and non-sufficient examples, annotated examples, in which they can examine to understand the context of what they're doing, right? And you don't have to provide a full example, right? You want to hone in on those examples where students often fumble or fail in those assignments and activities, right? Where they get bottlenecked all the time. You have 4 or 5 students get hooked up on the same area each semester. So that's what we're talking about, providing examples to get them through those areas where they're really running into problems. And sometimes we call this bottlenecking, or they're getting hooked. So what does this mean, right? Once you do this, once you get into this formula for the way you present assignments, does it work automatically? And the answer turns out in research, no. There's actually one more step you have to do. And that step is, once you give an assignment, you ask the students to report back to you those same criteria back. So you ask the students, what is going to be this assignment's goal, right? How is this going to help you? What do you have to do, right? What are those mistakes and recommended steps or roadblocks that I talked about? Where is the checklist going to be, or rubric, and how can I find those annotated examples? And the easiest way to do this often is, if you're teaching in class, you can do this in a handout where you just have them fill it out as an exit ticket. But in an online course, you can do a quick quiz, or you can add it to a weekly quiz that's already happening, right? So you could do a separate quiz. And this is a course, it's called the Check for Understanding, where you're having them basically teach you back to make sure that they understand. So both of these pieces need to happen for that research to get that statistically significant effect to sort of check in. You need both of these to occur in your assignments, and especially right at the beginning of the semester. As the semester goes on and on, students get more and more comfortable with what they're supposed to do, so you can start to relax a little bit of this, right? But in the beginning, you really want to scaffold this fully, and then you can start to retreat as you go through the semester. So I've provided an example of this, which you might see from the EPTO course, right? So this one's about discussions, right? How do I onboard them? How do I bring them through the discussion? So first, I'm going to give them the information about how. So I'm orientating them, like in scaffolding, I'm orientating them to the discussion. Here's where I'm answering why right in the beginning. And then I'm added a video of exactly how they should go about it, right? So I'm giving a little video about that. And then I added detailed information to continue to orientate them about different uses of discussions over and over. So there's a lot of information about how to plan effective discussions. So I'm giving them that orientation. 2, I'm also going to give them a facilitation. So this is a second part of orientating them to the information. Again, I'm answering why are they watching this? How do they go about it? And again, I'm giving them a detailed information, additional information that will help them really hone into different types of activities that they can do with engaging instructions. Then I'm giving them the actual assignment, right? I'm giving them their task list. Here is the task list that they're going to do. And you can see that right there. I also talk about the expectations, what I talk about. And then again, I'm putting in that technology scaffolding in case they've never used an assignment before, or if they've never used a discussion before, right? So this one particularly is about writing a discussion plan for your course design, right? So this is an assignment going through. And then finally, I'm showing them a detailed rubric with criteria of exactly what they need to do to get that, those points, right? How they're going to work through that plan. And then I'm giving them a walkthrough. I actually give them a video where I walk through and explain every part of this rubric, and I show some examples. And finally, I provide additional examples of previously made discussion plans from students that they can review before they actually start their own, right? So again, right, if we go back, here's where I'm engaging them in the purpose. I'm telling them the why, the how, the where, and the when. Then I'm giving them their task list of what they need to do. I'm showing them the rubric criteria, everything they need to do to pass this. I walk through the rubric with them and the examples in detail so they can watch this recording. And then I provide additional examples for that. So that is how you want to scaffold your activities and assignments for each one of these assignments that you're giving at the beginning of the course. Now, as I go on in the course, I'll start to rein some of these things in. Maybe I'm not going to get any I'll remove the scaffolding for technology, because once they've done the assignment and submitted it, they know what they're doing, right? So they're not only going to need that the first 1 or 2 times they do an assignment, right? I'm going to, the task list is always going to be there, and the expectations are always going to be there. The rubric is always going to be there, but I may be less, I may cut the criteria back a little, lump some of these together, and have more critical thinking going on for them about what they're going to add. I might not walk through the rubric or the assignments later in the semester, right? I've done it a couple of times, you know, in the first or second, so they really don't need to. They know what they're doing. They're looking for those rubrics. They're looking for the examples. And I'm always going to give them examples, probably not so much as it goes on. I'm going to cut it down, and maybe I'm only giving them 1 example by the end of the semester, if any at all, right? If it's a final assessment, I'm not going to give them any examples at all, right? If I'm doing a summative assessment, these are all for formative assignments. There are other examples available on the Tilt Higher Ed. They have a database basically from all different departments with all different subjects, all different types of courses that have donated their examples of assignments and how they're written. So I provided 2 different ways you could do it tonight. So the first one is using, I'll just go back to her way that she's using it this way, where you could state it out clearly, or you can use it again the way that I'm sort of modeling it here, which is a more detailed way for students with the technology scaffolding is included. So for this one, I'm going to go back to my other presentation. There we go. Is there any questions about that? That was a lot, very fast. Questions about how to scaffold, Questions about purpose or the objectives? So once you get a hang of how you're working with the TILT framework, it gets easier and easier to use over time, and it's not a lot of work. You sort of start just like when accessibility at first is really hard, you're like, oh geez, I got to do all this stuff. But as you start to create new documentation, you're sort of automatically doing all the accessibility stuff. So you no longer have to correct most of it when you upload to Blackboard. It's the same thing with the TILT framework. As you start off with writing your assignments, your discussions, your collaboration work, your group work, all these different things, it takes some time to sort of get it into this framework. But then going forward, it becomes, as you write new assignments, you start to automatically just write it in that format over time, and it becomes much easier. There's quite a bit of resources with the TILT framework. You can find more information and examples in modules 5 and 6 in the Community of Effective Practice. You can just jump in there. There's 2 different modeling. There's a little bit of research here about managing controversy when you're working with groups online, and when you're setting expectations for group work. So I thought that was a nice little piece there. We have a link to group work and cooperative learning online from SUNY Online. They actually have a extensive section of resources there. Setting discussion expectations also is a great link from SUNY. I put in gender inclusivity and gender inclusive language, which is more about learning students' names and pronouns. And that was done by, it's a little video done by Jess Wilkie. She did that as part of one of the professional development days in one of our presentations that we did. It's about 12 minutes long. And it's really a great way to understand the difference between some of the gender pronouns and how to use those correctly. And then there's writing effective assignments. There's a webinar recording. I've given the TILT framework before. And there's also a toolkit if you like to sort of print out toolkits. It's called Create Simple and Clear Assignments, which goes back through the TILT framework. And we have one of our new, we're very lucky actually, one of our new instructional designers that is just coming on board. She actually comes from a TILT university, one of the founding members of that TILT framework. And she's going to put together a little mini course for us, a three module self-paced mini course, which everybody will be able to go through, and we'll have some webinars next semester to really go more in depth into the TILT framework and how that works. And I just want to remind everybody of next week on November 9th, Wednesday, from 12 to 1, we'll have Rob coming from SUNY Online. He's really excited to talk to everybody, and he's really been very impressed with the way faculty are embracing OSCQR here. That doesn't always happen at colleges and universities, so he's really impressed with everybody and the work that we're doing. So he's really excited to talk to everybody. There's the link right there to register, and I can also give you another link to get to that as well. Right on the Learning Design Center top page is also a link, it's in the chat, to get to the register for the workshop. And then of course, if you haven't signed up, you can still sign up for a course review. It takes you about an hour for us to walk through it. It takes about an hour for you to review your course. And then it takes about an hour for us to meet and walk through and talk about feedback and how we move forward in person in the future, how we're going to work on your course together and get the OSCQR standards sufficiently present, as they say.